Now to our first conversation. We see all markets have seen record levels of volatility since the war in Ukraine started. Now, demand constraints are also playing into prices, which have led to rising energy prices globally. Back here in Nigeria, the rallying oil prices haven't materialized due to oil theft and Nigeria not meeting its supply quota. Joining us now is Dr. Yinka Opeke, CEO, founder, Smart Gas. Good morning. Great to have you on the program.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, so, yeah, quite an interesting time, you know, interesting times in the oil market. We're seeing the federal government, you know, talking about oil theft and vandalism, you know, as factors, you know, affecting crude production. What's your thoughts on that?
Wow, so it's interesting that I've been hearing about this probably since I was born, you know, and it's still very relevant right now, you know. And so for me, judging from my experience and the way things are done in more developed economies that are all producing countries, you would expect that it's an integration of different things. Because from what I understand, there are different pipelines. So you have the crude oil pipelines, you have the gas pipelines, and then you have other products. And these are managed by different entities, you know. So like the crude oil is by the IOCs and other indigenous producers, you know, and what I understand is that the pipelines are created based on engineering codes, you know, so you now start asking yourself that it's not going to be one size fits all because different pipelines are going through different communities. So if you ask me, I'm going to be thinking things like there has to be a lot of innovation, technology, engineering, you know, community engagement, all the stakeholder engagement, and personnel is also very important, you know, because, for example, you can't say that if you have a pipeline that is as long as 500 meters, you're going to put policemen to guard it. That's not practical. And then you say, what if I deploy technology like drones? But drones also have to be integrated because even if a drone detects a vandalization, the drone is not going to intervene. You know, so it's really difficult to say it's a one-size-fits-all. You have to look at the community, but it's very important for stakeholders in that community. So you talk about the government, you talk about the host communities, you talk about all players that directly impact the pipeline. You now start asking yourself, where are the bridgeable, the breakable places there? So maybe the government is doing it to some extent, but to what extent is what you're going to ask about. So it's really a very complex issue, but you know, it really has to be dealt with because the pipelines are the assets of the nation and they are very integral in terms of revenue generation. So it's something that we need to look for long-term solutions towards once and for all.
Yeah, quite a myriad of problems there, but you know, for you, what short-term solutions, you know, can we put in place to just, you know, stabilize the sector?
I'm not sure there are short-term fixes to it because talking about all of this, the way I see things in Nigeria is that we kind of like cherry-pick solutions. We really don't look at it from the grassroots, from the depth of it. What exactly is the cause? So now we're kind of like doing, you know, something pitch and patch, that kind of thing. So in terms of pipeline vandalizations, there are no short-term solutions. Like I said, it's an aggregate of so many things. You're looking at the traditional, conventional methods, then in addition to the very, you know, high-tech methodologies and things like that, you know. So you ask yourself as well, in terms of, there's one thing to have the pipeline, you're talking about maintenance, because I'm not sure whether I can use pipelines right now to transport diesel or petrol from one state to the other. Then you're talking about, are there corrosion in the pipeline? So it's a whole lot of things whereby the specialists in those industries and then the stakeholders really have to sit together to look at the pipelines on a case-by-case basis and determine, you know, what solutions in terms of, like you said, maybe medium-term and long-term, really.
Quite interesting. And, you know, also we've had that debate about fuel subsidy. You know, it's been ongoing. And, you know, for you, what's the solution here?
Fuel subsidy. So if you ask me, I think any kind of subsidy is a displacement cost. And these are monies that are probably supposed to go to other things like maybe healthcare, road security, and things like that. You know, so the question I ask myself is, what are the cost-benefit analysis? If you ask people now, of course, they'll say that fuel subsidy allows you to make the product affordable for the average, you know, back to what I'm saying. Over time, we have been into oil, but we haven't had sufficient infrastructure for us to actually produce and refine our crude oil. And that is why we're still exporting and then importing refined, you know. But now we're looking for short-term solutions, and the subsidy is part of it. So I ask myself, what's the cost-benefit analysis, which is what the government should ask themselves. Who is it really benefiting? Is it benefiting the importers, the private sector, the government, the citizens? You know, you start asking yourself. I really see it as there's a lot of corruption in it. There's not so much transparency in it, if you ask me. So even though in the short term, if they remove it, it's really going to affect the end user, because now price of products will increase, transportation will increase, living costs will increase, and all of that. But my point is, usually at a national scale, you always have to look at long-term solutions. So if Nigeria had been a place whereby the citizens believe in the leadership, they have made policies, as in Nigeria is in dire need of economic policies that has to be done by people who understand the economics of trade, local and international trade, not based on gender, not based on tribe, not based on who you know and things like that. So those are the things that are lacking, that makes us put in some policies, that are not really long-term. So if you ask me, holistically, I think it's a displacement cost, and I think that we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, which is what we usually do in Nigeria. And because Nigerians don't have integrity in the leadership, they question every move. One way or the other, there's no how things would not be uncomfortable for a while. But like I said, if you understand that it's for a greater good, it's easier for you to preach that message. So subsidy, it's a bit ish for me, even though I know that, of course, it's making fuel affordable for me in the short term, but really, how sustainable is it?
Well, we've seen a teaser, with the price movement of diesel there. And obviously, that could actually happen,
yes.
With PMS. And
exactly.
it was quite a run there. We see the prices of diesel, and it's obviously affecting everyone.
Everybody. And, a friend of mine was telling me, and these are people that you will consider living very comfortable lives, and a friend of mine was telling me how, a generator packed up, she only had one. So now you're talking about, some people will tell you, I have a big gen, I have a small gen, I have an inverter, I'm considering solar. All of that just sounds really crazy to me. And these are expenses in addition to other expenses. And she was telling me how at midnight, her generator broke down, they all had to remove their clothes, her baby had rashes, they had to be fanning themselves. And I'm like, this is someone that on a good day earns a decent income. Now, what do you now want to say about the grassroots? For us, we want to use a truck for something. It tells us by Monday, it's 100,000. But if you don't do it right now, the price of diesel is going up by, Saturday is 150. So back to what you're saying, it's going to directly impact, the citizens. However, at the end of the day, like I said, when maybe the big elephants and the big dogs fight, it's the grassroots that suffer for it. This is typically the situation for it, because it's either in terms of the decisions, not making the right decisions, not putting in the right policies, not following through, no sanctions, for default, and so many things. That's what really leads to all these kind of issues, and it's just unfortunate that's where we are right now.
Right, and let's look at the Petroleum Industry Act now. It's been perceived to be the solution, to the challenges in this industry. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree on paper, and I would explain why. So the Petroleum Industry Act is good because, of course, it attracts capital in terms of local and foreign investments. It also attracts a decent return on investments for those who invest. I know that part of the core focus is also to improve gas development, to the host communities will also benefit, and it also brings about a fair level of transparency in the entire framework that governs the oil and gas sector. But like I said, that's on paper. Whatever policies are created are still going to be implemented by human beings. So it's just like business. I'm in business, and I always tell people every idea is a great idea. It now boils down to the implementation of it. So when these foreign investors are coming in with their funds, what are they met with? Are the processes really transparent? What you ask for, is that what you get? Are there things that are going to contravene their corporate ethics and things like that? So it really goes beyond it. So if you ask me, the PIA, it's a very good and a welcome development that would help us in terms of, local and foreign earnings and things like that. But in terms of the implementation, it brings me back to the people, the leadership. Who are those that are going to implement it, and how well are they going to follow it through?
Now, talking about implementation, what's it going to cost us, with this delay in implementation?
Well, you have to give it to the government, because really, I think it was just passed into, law 2021, if you ask me. So it's just like, old habits die young. The government has been used to old ways of doing things. They are known for all the bureaucracy and all the things involved. So for them to transition into the new framework and all that will probably take a while. From my understanding, contracts need to be signed. There's so many agreements that need to be reviewed. Related agencies and government sectors will have to come in. So in terms of what it will cost us, it's just what I've said now. now. So the host communities that would have benefited, employment and things like that, capital into the economy, increasing our revenue that we can use to do other things, so it's really, so that's really the reverse of it. So because it's a government thing, we really have to just hope that, part of what we're preaching to them is that government have to start thinking about running the whole structure like a business, corporate sector, be a bit more, proactive in the ways you do your decision-making process. If it can be done in 5 steps, don't make it 15 steps, So practical ways like that. So I'm not really sure how long it's going to take, but we have to just cut the government some slacks and help them to transition from the old ways. Yeah.
Okay, we've seen, divestment, from IOCs, at this time. But, what immediate steps, can be taken to, get private sector actually, invested, in the sector?
So I would be speaking from personal experience in terms of that, because I'm in the downstream gas sector. Like you said, I run Smart Gas, and I have to deal with the government sector because our industry is heavily regulated by the government sector, either at the state or at the government level. The major issue is always the bureaucracy. Do you understand? You have to, everybody is just looking for what they can get from it. So you'll be expecting that you want something more transparent. Back to what I said, Nigeria has to transition to upscaling based on technology. Technology allows for scalability, transparency. I need to apply for something. What are the processes? It doesn't really have to be like you go to an agency and somebody's almost feeling like they're doing you a favor to say, oh, come with me, I'll help you. Automatically from the beginning, they're making it seem as if you already owe them. That thing really, the vibes are not good. So if you ask me, I would say the government should try to have a more transparent system whereby the strategies they want to use for implementation are really very clear. The vision is clear. They put in the right personnel who are qualified. There has to be KPIs. What are your key performance indices? Who are those that are measuring it? What are the sanctions for not measuring it? So all of it really has to do a lot with the efficiency of the government process. But they really have to reduce the process it takes in terms of their decision making and things like that, and communicate with a lot of transparency. So that can also, encourage people to invest in the system.
And we've seen, with this war in Ukraine, we've seen how much Europe is, reliant on Russia for its gas needs. And we see the Minister of State for Petroleum, saying that, Nigeria will try to meet this demand. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm a bit confused because on one end, so I believe that charity begins at home, They say that it's the decade of gas in Nigeria. The government is doing a lot to promote gas adoption. I heard that based on statistics, about 2015, we're consuming about maybe 50,000 metric tons, but as of now, we're consuming about 1.2 million metric tons. And Nigeria still doesn't have capacity for it. And that was why, the Nigeria LNG, decided to domesticate all its production so that they can increase local demand. So I would expect that even though, helping countries like Ukraine, Europe and and all of that is good because it helps us with foreign earnings, it's still important for us to domesticate, try to look at the local market, see how you can increase the supply, before we now decide to go global. So it's a good decision, but in context of what is going on now, like I said, in the gas industry, about 6 or 7 months ago, we're selling about a 12.5 kg for about 3,800. As of today, is 9,000 naira. So you can see that the leap is about over 200,000, and you're expecting somebody who is living on less than $1 or $2 a day to afford that. And that's why you see somebody going to the gas station to just probably buy 1 kg, 2 kg, 3 kg in their tanks that can take more capacity because the economic power is really very low. So if you ask me, I think the primary focus is on domesticating it before you start looking at, the export opportunities.
So you're saying we cannot look at export opportunities at this point?
I'm not sitting on the seat of power, so I cannot be absolute to say we cannot. I'm just giving you my own suggestion that I would like a lot more focus to be on, increasing the capacity, the supply within before we start looking at other.
All right, but, for you now, there's a lot of talk about energy, transition at this point. Are there any homegrown solutions, for Nigeria at this point?
There are a lot, but on paper. So, like I said, we're doing a whole lot in terms of the downstream, but to increase capacity, you need access to funds. And that brings you to the likes of the central bank, the Bank of Industry, who talk about intervention loans. How accessible are those loans? I can have another session with you in terms of these intervention loans. I tell anybody, there's no loan we haven't tried to access in smart gas, but the truth of the matter is that it's just not possible. And then you ask yourself, there is proof of concept. You have seen what we are doing. You can see that the market is there. We import cylinders. The market is inexhaustible. We're always low on inventory. And then you're telling people, look at my book, see what I have. But then they're going to disqualify you because they say that maybe you want to borrow 400 million naira, bring a collateral that is 400 million or more than that. If I had that, would I really come to you? Do you understand? So you can't base accessing funds just on collateral. And then they'll tell you, maybe you should go and look for a tripartite collateral from a third party. That third party has probably used its collateral to get a loan from the bank as well. You get what I mean? So in terms of local solutions, there are. But the gas sector is something that is very capital intensive, and you really need to utilize, funds to be able to scale up and expand. So for us right now, we're just expanding at our own pace based on cash flow until we get credible investors who can then help us with the, cash inflow that we require. So yes, the opportunities are enormous locally, but we need the government to back us up. And that's the issue of PPP. Private sector already know how to do this. Some of them are already doing it. Some want to scale up, some want to go into it. But the conditions precedent, sometimes you really just can't match them.
All right. Yeah. Anyway, we're seeing, oil prices, trend downward from, all-time highs, so that's good for energy costs. And let's hope it trends downward, and let's hope for peace at this point.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Yinka.
Thank you.
CEO Smart Gas. It was great having you on Business Morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so after the break, AFEX Commodities Market is next. Do stay with us. This is Business Morning.